Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Wild Woman podcast. I have a lovely lady with me today from the same part of the country as myself, or near enough. Anne McDonagh. She's based near Loughrea on the west coast of Ireland, for anyone who is not in Ireland and doesn't know where it is. So it's a lovely spot. It's where my mother comes from. So I've got a bit of a soft spot for that part of the world. So Anne, I met through a carers group, and particularly, I think it was the tapping course that I remember doing with another lovely lady that I interviewed. And I was just very taken with Anne, her energy, I got a very strong sense of a very caring person who has a lot of her own life to deal with, but has sort of embraced this very holistic way of living and supporting others. And I really want to talk to her and hear more about her story and what she has to share with the world. So thank you, Anne. I'm really grateful for you coming on the podcast today.
Thank you, Celine. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. And I just wanted to start with you. I just love how when you sent me a message, you described your journey as colorful, chaotic, crushing, cathartic, calming, captivating. And I was like, wow, that's a journey. But I love it because I think probably on some level, all of us will experience all of that. Maybe we don't admit it always, but that, we all have these ups and downs in life. I know you work also as, and I love you describe an intuitive, a light worker. And maybe that's where we might start. Can you talk a little bit about, when you describe yourself as an intuitive and a light worker, is that something you were always consciously aware of from a very young age as a child?
I think definitely I was aware of it from quite young because I always seem to read people by their energy, but even more so as I've gotten older, it's my go-to, and it's where I kind of not really assess, but I just tune in to people, and I can know then who I'm safe with, really. So I think I've had that intuitive side has been present from a very, very young age. And I was born into a family of, who had a very organic take on life. And my mom was all into healing and remedies. And my mom and my dad lived a very organic life here with my aunt and my uncle. So I think it was ever present, really.
Wow, that's lovely. It's so lovely to hear of someone's parents. I don't know, and I suppose that is the reality. And when I think back to remembering my grandmother as well, um, lived, I think, quite an organic life. And it's lovely to hear of someone growing up. So you grew up around that sort of holistic way of approaching life. Is it you're saying? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I was born on a farming land here, and born into a farming land, and we all worked together as a little community, as a family, and we lived off the earth completely. My mom and dad grew vegetables and fruit, and when we'd go visit my granny, it was the same with her. She had apple trees and she'd gooseberries, and we were always picking berries or picking mushrooms. It was very, very organic. Yeah.
Gosh, it sounds like a really ideal childhood in many
It
ways.
was
How would you describe your childhood and growing up?
absolutely blissful with
Wow.
my parents, and my aunt and my uncle lived with us as well. There's nine of us, and so there was 13 in the house, and the back door, front door were always open, and the neighbors were always in and out, as we were in and out of their houses as well. We were up and down the neighborhood. We always had a meh-hal going. There was always farming community here that helped each other out. My uncle was special, and his favorite saying was, "I'll give you a day," or his other favorite was cup of tea. So he worked alongside my dad, and they farmed the length and breadth of the county. and they brought us to fairs and festivals. We used to be brought to the October Fair every year, and we would go out to Ahagaur to the fairs, and my dad made really good friends with the farmers out there, and he bought Connemara sheep. They were wild ones. They were they were ones we had to try and tame, which didn't always work out. And yeah, he made a best friend of a man out there, and they traveled over and back to see each other, and it was beautiful. It was really, really blissful and organic and natural and wholesome. And we all worked, we all did our bit, we all chipped in. And that was exactly how Daddy approached it, that we were our own little community. And if anyone ever needed help, he would always advise us to reach out and help. And, he always said to us, if anyone had a problem, even if it wasn't our problem, if it was, a problem they had and they couldn't talk about it, to come to him. So there was open communication with my mum and my dad always. It was beautiful that we knew we could come to them and just talk openly.
Oh, sounds like a very tribal sense of, community in a good way, when you can you just describe meh-hal for anyone who might be listening and isn't from Ireland or would have never heard of what meh-hal is?
Yes,
Mm.
of course. So a meh-hal is where you have a community of people, and in our case we were all farming. So, if we were doing a day in the bog, if we were footing the turf or if we were bringing it home, and the farming work can be quite intense, and it can be dependent on weather as well, obviously. So, or if we were doing the hay, if we were making bales of hay, we would come together as a community, and whatever farmers were available and their families on the day would meet up, and or we'd have discussed it. They'd meet at the weekend outside the church. After mass, they'd have a chat, and it would be like, oh, I have to do such a job, and then out of that they'd make a little plan, and they'd give each other a day. There was no money involved. It was just mainly, it was kind of sharing the workload,
Mhm.
and that's exactly what a meh-hal was. And I think meh-hal is starting to come back into our communities
Mm.
again. There's that kind of a feeling, like there's a group of us ladies now, and we help each other out. If one needs bookkeeping done, if the other needs cleaning done, wherever the area they feel that they're finding a slight bit of struggle, or it's not their forte,
Mm.
then we kind of reach out to each other and say, look, I can do that for you. And then they'll say, all right, in return, then I can do that for you. So it's kind of, a meh-hal really is where you just share the workload, you know?
Yeah.
And
Is that what it means in Irish? Is that the word? I should know this
yes,
myself. It does, doesn't it?
that's it.
Sharing, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And then, like, my mum used to be up at 6 o'clock every morning, and she'd have picnics made, and there was a fun element to it as well. We'd all be in a big field of hay, and then we'd do our work, and then we'd have our breaks, and we'd have our little picnics, and it was beautiful. And we got to know the neighbors really, really well. And there was some relatives as well. Our cousins were down, my mom's cousins were down the road, and we all just kind of just helped each other along.
Mm. It just sounds so idyllic. It really does. Just listening to you, I'm like, oh my God, that's yeah, you can just
Uh,
imagine it. Yeah.
it was beautiful. It was like we'd be out through the fields until 10 o'clock at night, and there was never fear or upset or worry or strain, and all the neighbors looked out for each other's kids. And like that, my uncle being special, he was able to roam up and down the road here, and the neighbors would always look out for him. They'd call him in for a cuppa if he was wheeling any
Mm.
of us in the pram. There was always that sense of safety and kindness and happiness. And I remember my neighbour said to me at my mother's wake, she said, oh my God, there was many as the bucket of water I came down for that I didn't need. And my dad had a tap running by the shed so that the neighbours were able to come and get some water. if they needed it. And I was kind of mystified, and I was saying to her, and why? Like, and she said, just to spend time with your mother. And she said with her first baby, she just needed help and guidance, and she'd come down to mam, and mam was after having me a year before that, so I was the ninth child. I was the
God.
10th birth and the ninth child. And you know, she said for her to come in here and my mom to just chat to her, and mom would take the baby if the baby was crying or fussy, or you know, or if she felt that this lady needed a little break, she'd take the baby, make a cuppa, and they'd sit and have the cup of tea. And you know, she said it wasn't about the bucket of water. She never said it to my mom, I don't need this bucket of water. It was the fact
Yeah.
that you got to spend time with her and just relax. And she said she went back a much happier mother, ma'am, to her household. And, you know, and she felt more confident in herself as well, you
Mm.
know.
Isn't it
So,
just the richness in, as you said, the sharing?
yeah,
It feels like that in everything in life. You know, if you're going through a difficult time, it isn't always that anyone can solve it if you've lost someone, but it's the sharing is where the sort of healing happens. Isn't
absolutely.
this? It definitely feels like that's what you're describing, even if people didn't know. Like even saying the bucket of water she didn't need, but it wasn't about the bucket of water at all.
Not
Um,
at all.
but it's
No, it
there.
wasn't.
It's like it's saying, isn't it? It's there. It's knowing that whatever you need is there, even if you don't need it now. You know, it's that safety, isn't it? That sense of security or something, and knowing that when you do need it, even it is there.
It is. That's
Yeah.
exactly it. And it's
Mm.
connection. And
Yeah.
my mum and dad would always say, you know, with the neighbours around here, like that, they could go to their neighbours discreetly and whatever they needed, you know, there was never an
Mm.
issue. You know, there was never, and no one ever held anything over anyone's head or said, you owe me this, or it was so cathartic in how they managed and how they lived so beautifully, and they treated each other with so much respect. You know, it was actually gorgeous. And we all grew up here in the neighborhood together, and we were off through the fields, and you know, everyone looked out for everyone. It was really lovely.
Yeah. And how do you feel about now when you look around, or do you feel that's coming back? Like that to me, the more I connect with the land or I go out, I keep saying that because I've been very drawn out just to be out in nature much more. That sense of what Ireland was about, it's like it's nearly coming in through my veins or something, just by going out on the land, even without people. It's like it's just in your DNA, and it feels like it's sort of rising up again for a lot of people. They can't maybe work out how do I, because everybody will say, well, the world has got different and everybody's busy and everybody's working and we're all separated. What's your sense of it now? Like you're living in much the same area, aren't you? As
Oh,
you
I'm
were?
still
Yeah.
living, yeah, I'm living in the home house. I extended
Okay.
on to the home house. So
Ah, okay.
yeah, I cared my mom and dad and my aunt and uncle on the far side of the house, and then my family are the other side of the house. So yeah, so I'm still living where I was born into, which is quite beautiful. And
Mm,
you know, yeah, I think there's a lot of the rat races happening again. Obviously, people have to work to keep the roof over their head, and there's a lot of go, go, go again. But I think there is that awareness where people just want to connect and they want to support each other. And I think it's kind of, you will gravitate towards those people really, and I think they gravitate towards you, and it's an energy base really.
mm,
But it's lovely to see, you know, groups of people that are like-minded and that support each other in wh- whichever way they can really. And
mm,
I love being part of that because, you know, there's lots of groups now that are meeting up and they're doing holistic shares, and other groups then are doing shares of cleaning each other's houses or making a meal, you know, just simple little things that can be quite overwhelming for someone in a situation. If you have something going on in the background, if somebody's sick, if you know you're going through a breakup, if you have elderly parents that you're caring, or you know, if you have a special child or a few special children, it's nice to know that there's that little community base there that
Mm,
you can reach out to, and you're not
mm,
judged, and you don't feel less of a person, and you don't feel that, you're not coping or managing, because they're there to kind of hold you up and fix your crown, as opposed to kind of tearing you down and asking you, well, why aren't you coping, or what's your problem, or they're
mm.
there to just kind of hold you safely. And I think that is what the meh-hal was always all about. It was an unwritten, an unwritten kind of agreement, is maybe too strong of a word, but it was just an unwritten wholesomeness where people supported each other. And I think, yeah, some of that element is coming back around, and I would love for people to embrace it,
Yeah.
and to be part of it.
Yeah. I think though I think it's innate in us. Like listening to you speak, it's like I can feel it. And I feel that desire, I felt that desire in myself for a number of years, not knowing what it was. I think that's often what happens. It's just a natural part of evolving and growing and being a human being. Of course, in the world you go out, you're encouraged, you have to get a job and all these things you do. Believe it's fine to do them. That's what I always feel. There's nothing wrong with any of these things, but it's the belief that it's going to bring you something that you're craving deeply inside that it cannot bring. And eventually it does draw you back to yourself, I find. And in coming back to yourself, you realize what you really, it's that connection with others who are also backing themselves in their heart, if you, for want of a better word, that starts, it just happens organically, I'm seeing. Is that how you, like when you say like-minded people, that's, and it's not saying right or wrong or anything, it's just wherever you are and whatever works for you, that's fine. But if you are in that place where there's something like, oh, I'm really struggling, and maybe not able to find the community, maybe living in an environment where that isn't so readily available, well, in a way that you think it would be, like as in your next door neighbor. Um, is that, are you, what would you say to someone who's maybe in that, listening to you going, oh my God, that's just so lovely. And if you're struggling to find that, what would you recommend they do?
I'd say reach out, because I know for me personally, for many years as a family carer, and being in the absolute depths of it, and in becoming a family carer, and it most often happens overnight. Like, you just become a detective overnight. You wear many hats. You're a carer first and foremost, but you're also, reaching out for services and support, and if it's your elderly parents you're looking after, well then you're trying to manage all levels. That there's so many levels to being a carer, and even when if you're caring special needs children or young adults, there's a lot of levels there as well. But then there's other people in other little niches of life where, they might be struggling with mothering, or they might be struggling with their partner,
Mm,
and they might have difficulties going on in the background, but they're trying to keep the the bright side out. They're trying to, protect their children, maybe if there's issues at home. And it's just, I would say to them, reach out. Like here in Loughrea, in my local town, there's a family resource centre. They are absolutely amazing there. They're just
mm,
beautiful people. And just join groups, really. Like, I think that's when I started to come back to myself, when I started to join groups.
mm,
And even like with being a carer, there's many carer support groups that you know yourself. And through that, you can upskill, you can re-educate yourself. There's a lot of entities out there now, like Family Carers Ireland. There's Care Alliance. I've done courses through Care Alliance. My son Oshin was diagnosed with leukemia at 16, and 2 years previous to that, he was diagnosed with ME. And I had been on a journey with him from quite a young age, where he had needed extra support, and he had learning difficulties as well. So, in caring him, I met other people that had caring roles as well. Now, we mightn't have the same caring role, but some
mm,
of our care overlaps. So in meeting those people, you get to support each other. And, I've met a lovely, beautiful little community through a carer support group here locally. And then, like, in visiting the Family Resource Centre, there's counselling at a reduced rate, which I found absolutely amazing years ago. Not long before my dad passed away, I engaged in counselling there, and I found that a huge support. And out of that, other supports come. You reach out, and then someone suggests something to you, or you know you talk to other people, and then all these supports start to kind of come into your awareness that you didn't even realize were there. Like when Oisin was diagnosed, I had been dropping him to school in Loughrea every morning. I'd been passing the hand in hand office, and I'd looked at it one day and I was wondering, I was saying, I wonder what is that about? And then I saw, oh, I'm getting shivers now, childhood cancer, and when Oisin was diagnosed, I didn't join the dots, and I didn't think, oh, I could access support from this entity. And it was until I was talking to my brother in Cavan, and he said to me, oh, and he said, my friend, he had lost his father to cancer, and there had been no services in their area at all. And that man had actually set up services to support families. He had set up taxis to the hospitals. He had set up, night nurses, and he'd set up so many services in the journey of caring his father. And he said to me, do you want to talk to him? And I said, oh God, yeah. I mean, I'd love to. So this man rang me anyway, and we'd chat. I pulled in on the side of the road, actually coming home from the hospital from Oisin. And it was so eerie and so lonely because we were in lockdown at the time. And he said to me, oh, do you know that place there in Loughrea? And he couldn't think of the name of it, but he had the phone number, so he gave it to me. And I was like, God, I didn't even think of that place. So I rang them up, and they were a huge support in my situation. So it was just, I think it's taken action. For me, at times, I can get overwhelmed, and things then start to grow legs and arms. And I can, a physiotherapist said to me years ago when I was caring my oldies, my hip had locked, and he did acupuncture for me, and he did physiotherapy, and he said, you have paralysis by analysis. He said, you're so up in your head, you're so analyzing every little thing down to the last detail, that you are just like totally clenching up, you're totally rigid. And he did acupuncture for me, and that freed me up. So I would say, to people in general, I would say reach out, find your community, and in finding your communities, you'll find yourself, or maybe it'll be vice versa. Maybe you'll find yourself first, and then you'll find your communities. But definitely take action and reach out. Don't stay stuck, because, and now I know that's easier said than done, because I have been brutally stuck at times and found it very, very hard to reach out. But in doing so, it's really productive and really supportive.
Yeah, that's lovely advice. I love that you'll find yourself and find your communities, or the other way around. And it does feel like that's what's happening now for people. I even found it through Family Carers Ireland or different communities. And when you say even reaching out, what's lovely in one way is that we've got, not that you want to be online all the time, but if you're a little bit concerned, even say, well, maybe the first step is just to go, I'll try out a group maybe that meet on Zoom, and just to see that you feel comfortable, that you don't, if it's a big step to walk in the door of somewhere, that can be the first start, or a phone call. But I love what you say, because I found that just through that particular group is you're meeting human beings who are not just one-dimensional, I'm here for this. You're meeting, like what you're describing, the meh-hal again. It sounds like it's, in our modern world, meh-hal is coming back, but it's coming back in a different way for the world that we live in. So yes, you mightn't have, you described your family and that whole community growing up. And I think that's how we are designed to live, and we will go back to it in whatever way, but it is the way as human beings we need to feel fulfilled and rich and connected and alive and support all the things you've said. So maybe this is the start, these groups that are setting up to support people in different ways, and there's so much going on under the surface, as you describe. You drove through your town and you didn't know, wow, there's people here that can help me. I think when, as you describe, when you're open, it starts to be shown to you, that you were there, suddenly you start to notice things, and trust that the universe or whatever force you believe in is going to support you, because it does. It always, in my experience, it always does.
Oh, 100%. I fully believe that. I think you just have to ask,
Yeah,
really, and in asking you receive.
yeah.
And yeah, but it's to kind of not stew in it, really. It's you can, if you have a low time, which I've had many of them, you can feel it and you just sit with it. But try then to reach out and, gain support, because that's
Mm.
the key to everything, really. And I
Yeah.
was I was really brutal at asking for help. I
Mm.
just I had this innate thing within me that I thought I could do everything for everyone all of the time. And
Mm.
then I just met with Burnout City. And it's just so draining. And it serves nobody, actually, because you get so drained yourself and so burnt out that you're just a shadow of yourself and you're running and racing. And it's when you actually stop and take time to think and reflect and self-care. It's not like some people would think self-care is selfish. It's not. It's exactly what it says. It's self-care. And taking that time out is it's actually blissful, and it brings you back to your situation, whatever your situation may be, it brings you back to it far more refreshed.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I started in the holistic modalities, because I was heavily caring at the time. And a friend of mine said to me, "Do you know, God, if you spoke to this lady and check in with her courses and see, it might be really good for you." So I did, and I started a Reiki course in the height of my caring, but it was just a weekend a month, and I had care in place here at home, and I was blessed enough to have that. And then I just took that weekend to myself once a month, and it was so supportive. It was blissful. And I met the most beautiful bunch of ladies, and we just gelled from the get-go, and we're still in contact with each other. We have a WhatsApp group and we meet up. It might only be once a year, but and then we'd have our little chats in the background, and it was lovely, and it was supportive to myself as well. And then through that I went on to do reflexology, and I fell in love with that completely. I find that so natural for me.
Mm.
Just it just seems second nature to me, really. So yeah, I think it's kind of finding your niche and finding time for yourself, and not feeling that you're being selfish, that just realizing that it's self-care and it's important.
Yeah. And like, what I wouldn't mind doing from what you described there, it's like you nearly have to sometimes in your life go to the extremes of, it sounds like what you described in your, you've described your childhood and how lovely it was. You might just take us a little bit on the journey. I know you've just touched on the holistic therapies, but you've described that a lot went on. You've had a lot of ups and downs, and you don't necessarily need to go into all the specifics, but just to, because you talked about being very intuitive as a child and that being supported. Like, how did that develop? You went to school, you went on, you obviously got married, had a family. So how did your life unfold in a way that has brought you to where you are now, that you really, it's not like you had to go to another extreme where you were as a child and then sort of integrate and, learn what you've learned to know that you need to care for yourself and how to do that. Do you see all that has been a part of your own, I suppose, evolution, really?
Yeah, completely. Because, like, I had notions that I would be, when I was 16, I had notions that I wanted to do marketing and bilingual. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted, I was going to live in New York. I was telling my parents when I was 16 that when I was 18, I was out the door and I was going to be in New York. And, this kind of attitude, that never happened, obviously. Well, I did go to New York, but it was only for a brief visit. But yeah, I had high notions of, having a different lifestyle and city living, which was totally the opposite to what, I was reared to, and, to what was in my DNA really. And I don't know why I was taking those notions back then, but um ironically, my mom was saying to me, well, you're going to train in a secretarial course and you'll take up a job. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And she was saying, well, you will. So that's what happened. I trained in a secretarial course, and I did do German as part of that course, and I excelled in it. I absolutely adored it. But then I went on to work. My first job was a training centre in Loughrea, and it was the best training I could have ever had, the best start up job. I was running an office, and it was a training center for travelers, and they were young travelers coming in, and some of them would have been misplaced from school, or some of them, wanted to learn a skill. And it was just the vibe and the energy of the place was just unreal. And the teachers and the directors were fabulous people. And there was a lady that was running the kitchen, and she fed us all as well as teaching them. She was just brilliant. And it was a wholesome, wonderful start in my working life. And, there was a horticulture teacher, a local man here, and there was a woodwork teacher. And it was fabulous, really, and getting to know all the characters and getting to know all the people. And I just loved it, and there was an earthy feel to it, really. And then I was encouraged to go on from there. I was only supposed to be there for 6 months, but the lady that was the director got pregnant, and then she had complications afterwards, bless her, and she had to stay out of work longer than she had anticipated. So I was kept on for a longer stint there. So then the next director that came in encouraged me, and she was saying to me, oh, you should apply for jobs in the city and you should move on, and you're well capable. So I went working then in Supermag's head office, and I was there for a few years, and I became Pat McDonagh's PA for a while. So, and that was a very interesting job because, there was so many areas you could train in, and I did because I was eager. I was just loving it. So then I was working in the family business in an office space again, and then I got married and I had my children, and then my caring role just happened overnight. And I suppose I've been all the while working to come back to myself and to find myself and to find what I'm truly happy with, and, what work I'm happy, incorporating into my caring life now, really, to be honest, And I use the holistic modalities that I was trained in with my children all down through the years. I haven't stepped out professionally as of yet because I didn't get the opportunity. I was to launch myself when my son Oshin got ill, and obviously then it was full stop for the last 8 years. Our lives really have been on pause, and I wouldn't change that for the world. I'm so grateful that I was well enough and able enough to be there to care both Oshin and Lana, because both of them have hidden disabilities. And I just feel privileged that I'm their mom, and that I was positioned to care them and to know them and to love them and to understand them. And it's just, in caring someone, I think you get to know them on a deeper level as well. and you see the light inside them, and you see their struggles, but you see how beautiful and brilliant they are. And that's what I've tried to lean into, you know. I've really tried to lean into that side of things. And I think that stems from my mum and dad, because my mum and dad reared all of us, and organically and beautifully, and they reared each of us in the way that we needed to be reared. And that's the way I rear Oisín and Lana. They are polar opposites. Oisín
Really?
is, yeah, they're totally polar opposites. Like
Describe
Oisín,
them, yeah.
yeah, he's now 6'4" man, and young man, and he would levitate. He is just so evolved, and he's so relaxed, and he's so calm and gentle, and just, he's very intellectual. He's on the gifted range, and he's extremely intelligent, but very humble. Doesn't want that to be highlighted. He doesn't, you know, he doesn't really understand praise. He just thinks in his case, he thinks it's unnecessary. And
Sounds like he
he
knows
just
who he
glides.
is.
Yeah, he's very comfortable in his own skin, and he just glides through life, really. And then Alana, we describe Alana as like either wired or tired. She is just full on. She's curious, she's creative, she's busy, she's she's eclectic. She's just wild. She's super wild. And she's our belly laughs every single day. And like in the depths of Oisín's cancer journey, she was the one that, you know, would make us giggle. And she'd make the cup of tea. Even though she was going through her own struggles at the time, she had finished school at 14, just before Oisín was diagnosed with leukemia. And she was going through her own struggles. She had been bullied in school. She hadn't had the supports she was supposed to have gained, despite me, you know, advocating for her heavily. And she had a reduced timetable, and nothing was working. Nothing was meeting her needs. So in the end, she finished school, and then we were still talking. Myself and herself were still talking of trying to get her to engage, but it just, when it came to Oisín's diagnosis, then it was like a light bulb moment hit me, and I was like, no, this is not working, and I'll school her at home. And that's what I did. And in the year she came out of school unable to read at 14 years of age, and she wasn't able to string a few sentences together. She was full of anxiety, and within the year she was at home while Oisín was in hospital for a full year. She learned how to read with ease and grace. And like the first one of the first nights I came home from the hospital to spend a little bit of time with her, she was at the door waiting for me, arms open, hugged and cuddled and snuggled into me, and put on the kettle and said, we'll sit down now, we'll have a cuppa. And she was there to balance me at such a young age. And then she said to me, do you know, I found this book, and I think I might try and learn to read it. And now it was a very highbrow book, and it was definitely you know, too advanced for her in many ways. And I advised her of that. I was like, oh God, I don't know, you know, the depth of this book might just be a little bit too intense for you, and it's very graphic. And she said, I still want to read it. So she's very determined. And she had septicemic meningitis when she was 9 months old. And the team described the fight she put in was second to none, that they really didn't believe she should have been alive. So she has carried that through her lifetime. And she said to me, no, you know, if there's bits of it that, you know, you feel is inadequate, well then, okay, or inappropriate, then okay, we won't read that. But I want to read the bits in between. So I said, fine, okay. So then she took up the book and she struggled and pieced the words together. And any word she didn't know, I said to her, spell it and I'll call it. And the amazing thing about her is she will commit to memory. If you spell a word for her, she will commit that to memory straight away, and she will be able to repeat it again and again and again anytime she sees it. So in that year, she learned how to read, and it opened up the world for her because, you know, before that she was embarrassed going into like anywhere that would have a menu board. And if she was standing beside her friends, now her best friend was really, really good at the time, and you know, she would be discreet and she would help her. But going forward, it was causing her terrible, terrible stress. So it opened up her world, and I couldn't keep her in books then after that. She has her own little library now, and she saves her money and she buys her own books, and she's just amazing. You know, they're two fabulous young adults, and they have been through so much. It's unreal, actually, the amount they've been through down through the years. But they're managing, you know.
It sounds well, they're managing because of you as well. Like it goes back to, I think, how you described at the beginning, how you were brought up, and this very, you keep returning, and I just love the words you use, like wholesome and organic, and the meh-hal and the sharing and the love and the care. Like it just strikes me, well, absolutely, that's how they got through it as well. I mean, they're obviously very strong children or adults now. What has been the biggest thing you've learned from rearing children or having children who have these special qualities? What have they taught you the most?
Oh, they teach me every day. I mean, they actually amaze me. They've taught me to not kind of sweat the small stuff. And like Gushing, when he was 10 years of age, he was describing me as a helicopter, and he would ask me to submarine. He would say, please, please submarine. And then like
That's brilliant.
you,
Never.
you probably got from this interview that I have verbal diarrhea. So I mean, if I would be talking to him, he would give me a red light. So he would say, no, red light. So then in giving me the red light, I would have to go away and I'd have to potter and do whatever. And then I could revisit him and say, you know, what are we on? Amber, green, or is it still red? And he'd be like, amber, you know, and he'd give me a window. And then the red light would be introduced again, or he would say green. It should be dependent. So they're teaching me all the time. And like, he has taught me to just go with the flow. Like, Oisin lives for the moment and for the day. And he has done that from very young. And he just, it's like as if he deletes yesterday and deletes last week. Like I could say to him when he was in school, oh, do you know, the lads were on about whatever last week? And he'd be like, that was last week, you know, straight away. And he would say it in a very affirmative way, like, don't go there. That was last week. You know, and he's constantly teaching us. And like in his cancer journey, he taught us so much about gratefulness and about humility and dignity, and just being so spirited when he needed to be, and so strong. And I used to be told when he was younger to toughen him up, and that used to irritate me. And I would say, absolutely not. I will not be toughening, you know, my beautiful son, and not in the way of my beautiful little son that's, you know, a fragile little being, or I want to wrap him up in cotton wool or any of that kind of crack. It was that I could see his strengths. I could see the light in him. And, you know, it was just, he was into different things. He wasn't into sports. He wasn't into, you know, some of the stuff that would be defined as the regular stuff that young lads would be into. And he branched off on his own. He didn't mind that. And the funny thing about it, friends always gravitated towards him. His class of his national school, they just absolutely adored him, and they gravitated towards him, and they were always there to support him. And it was the same when he went into secondary school. He only had a full year of secondary school when he started to get really ill, and he had a new bunch of friends, and even some of the friends from national school still kept in contact. And like, he's not one for using a phone, so they would have to text me to see how he was, and he's constantly teaching us. And like with Alana now, he's open now to listen to her. Like when they were 13 and 15, they didn't get on at all. They were, he was telling her to have her manners. He was being the real man of the house, and putting manners on her and telling her to have respect for me. And she was at that age where she was rebellious, and she would just, she had no filter. She still has no filter. And he would just say to her, oh, just have a bit of respect. But now they have common interests and they get on really, really well. And he listened to her. If she's in distress or bothered, he will listen to her. So he's teaching me that I don't have to be there to give all the answers, and I don't have to listen all of the time. That he can take up part of that role as well, and willingly he wants to. And she's always teaching us. She teaches us how to have fun, and how to giggle, and how to be playful, and how to reach our inner child. Like, she was even talking to me last night about her inner child, and it was quite a deep conversation. And she got upset, but in getting upset, it was cathartic for her and for me. And she was saying there was so much about her inner child coming up, and we were saying, like, how we can support our inner child, and that in doing that we're supporting ourselves as an adult. So they're teaching me every single day, Celine, and I am so grateful for them, because they've shown me parts of myself that I mightn't like to have looked at, and I might have skated over for some years, and they give me a reality check quite regularly.
Yeah. But it sounds like these children, they're very, well, any child I've met that I would say is special, I would say gifted beyond like what we know what to do with. I think that's really what it is. There isn't an issue with anyone that comes onto this planet. There's no issue with at all. They have a special gift. And I think children, my experience, I don't have children, but of the children I know that I see that sometimes are given a hard time or struggle, it's because they're just beyond, I don't know how to even, it's not gifted in the sense they can do well in an exam. They can do that. It's very different, but it seems like there's a very special type of soul or child being born. And yes, they struggle within our sometimes limited way of our systems. And I think they are part of the catalyst for changing them. And I love to hear you say that they have this sense of self, the way you're talking about both of them, like, come on, get a grip, mom, or whatever. And I've noticed that with us, because that is what is needed. I don't know how, I'd love your take or view on experience of this, is that they are here to change the world, basically. We're in an evolutionary process. It's happening, in whatever way we are shifting on every way that the planet is looked at or measured or whatever. It is changing. We can feel it. So how do you see that?
I do look at it in that way, and I do think they are here to change, to bring change about, definitely. And like Oisin talks about regenerative farming, and he wants to get into that. He loves gardening, and they have their own strengths and they have their own ways. But definitely, I think special children have a way of bringing people together, and they have a way of shining a light on areas of life that you wouldn't have wanted to reach into, maybe, or you wouldn't have noticed. And they embrace diversity. They embrace, it doesn't matter your color, your creed, your sexuality, your pronouns, that none of that features to them. They just embrace everyone as they are, and they meet them where they are. And that's, I would have advocated that all down through the years, but it's innately in them, to meet someone where they're at. And if someone is struggling, to be there to support them, or to find the support. If it's bigger than them, then to reach out and find the supports. So yeah, I think definitely they're there to make changes. And I think the thing with school, I know when I was in national school, I was beaten very badly, and I was so distressed about the other children that were beaten around me, and
Physically beaten
yeah, physically
by the
beaten.
teacher.
Yeah, and it was brutal, and it was daily, and it was a lot to get over. Actually, I actually recently did a compassion key therapy with a lady called Tracy Igo, and one of my close friends, Elaine Cahill, is a life coach, and I've done an awful lot of work through her to kind of reach my inner child and to try and heal a lot of that. So my experience with part of my schooling was quite difficult, and it was hidden. It was, I was afraid to come home and tell mom and dad, and had I done, things would have been a lot different, I do believe. But in seeing my children go through their school experience, I was always on the alert, and I was always looking out for them. And the thing with the system is, it doesn't suit the needs of all children. It just doesn't. And it's very conditioning. It's very, I don't know if even academia covers it, because it's rote learning, and that doesn't suit everybody.
I don't think it suits anyone. I
No,
firmly believe, we are not meant to be rote learning. We are here as
no.
creative beings to create. And and it's not that I had a bad experience in school, but I just know with every fiber of my being that any system that's sort of, indoctrinating or, saying this is the way it is cannot be for the highest good of people. It just can't. I'm not saying there aren't well-meaning people there.
Yes.
Absolutely there
Mm.
are. There are people who are fantastic, and it's not a criticism at all of that, but
No.
these systems are not serving, I think, society even at large. They're just not. They're feeding a different, I feel, if a different, there's a greater, they're feeding a particular agenda around corporates and, feeding people into certain systems and jobs. And fine if you want to do that, but it isn't. I don't think it's sustainable personally. I think that where we are going on the planet is not going to sustain that way. And our children are showing us this. Just look at what you're describing. And I've heard many more. It's just, but we continue to not say label, and I don't like labeling either at all, but in an effort maybe to support some children. But I personally, I don't think that's the way of the future at all. I just feel it. And what you describe your children saying, they're not interested. I've noticed that with most young. This is something I wanted to ask you as well. There is so much division and separation, and for various reasons right now, and it really, I think the way is of unity. We're moving towards this unity consciousness. This is what we're evolving towards. And very much what you're describing with both your children is that they're sort of leading the way in that, because they're saying, although I think there's sort of an effort to keep us in that division, more young people are seeing through it and going, we're not interested in that. We just want to get on with everybody. Everybody is here to contribute. That's my sense of what you're saying. They're not interested in, oh, it's this label or that label. Would I be right? Is that,
Yeah.
it feels like they're here to teach us that, very much so. There is no answer in division and labeling each other. It just,
No,
never.
they don't see labels, and they don't see color, they don't see creed, they don't. If anything, they're very interested in, lots of people's religions, and, what vibe they follow, and they more so read people on energy levels. That's what they're interested in. They're, they just like that. They just want to live and let live, and they're not here to judge. That's one thing that they've hugely advocated for and shown. that they're not here to judge, and
Mm,
they don't believe in it. That they just don't think there's a need for it, really. That we're
mm,
all just trying to live our own lives, and if we can support each other, well and good. And that's the take they have on life,
yeah.
and it's quite refreshing. It's quite beautiful, actually.
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
And like they don't. Oshin doesn't like rehashing things either. He doesn't like
Mm,
going back over. He's like, that happened. It's
yeah.
done.
Yeah.
For Alana, she needs to process. She does need to process, and she does need to talk. So she needs to talk things out, and that's her approach. But they just feel that everybody should be allowed to live a
Mm,
happy life and a content life, and there's no need for discrimination or hurt. They don't
yeah.
they don't
Yeah.
believe in it.
Yeah, well, it's so good to hear. And what do they ever say what their passion is, or what do they feel is calling them at their age, or do they? I'm always interested in like what do they see as, yeah, bubbling up in them that they want to do.
Well, like when Oisin was in hospital, he was emailing me, and I was only sitting across the room from him. Lists of items that I needed to buy to dig out my dad's glass house. He was
Oh
like,
my God.
you need to get this sorted, and we need to
Wow.
be, regenerative living and sustainable living. So he's very much into sustainable living. And I dug out the glass house one evening. I came home from the hospital, and I just said, that's it, I'm doing it. And I sent him photos, and I hired a local man here from he has regenerative farming going up the road, and I hired him to come down and plant the glass house because I knew I wouldn't get the time myself. And he did that, so then I was able to take photos and send them in to Oisin, and Oisin was so excited. And then when he came home himself, it was his go-to. Even anytime we came back from the hospital now for any of his reviews, he will go straight to the glass house and he'll have a look. And
Mm,
then we went up to the local gardening centre. Mike and Susan Lyons up the road have a gardening centre, and we called up to them one day, and he bought me a cherry blossom tree, and it was just signifying our journey, really.
mm,
And he bought some plants, and he's still talking about, that we've a small little patch of, I don't know if you'd even call it land or a garden, or it's a little bit of land, I suppose, at the side of our house, and he has plans for that. So he's mad into gardening. He's mad into to and he did that from a very small age with my dad, actually. He'd be out there gardening with my dad. So it's in him, and he loves all of that. Now he's a real IT whiz,
mm,
and he's studying all sorts, computer science and cybersecurity and cyberbullying and lots of stuff online. But his passion would be earthy. It would be very much earthy.
mm,
And Alana Din is just hugely creative. She's from a very young age, she was all into making jewelry and art, and she had done so much at such a young age. Like she did gymnastics, she learned how to climb silks to the ceiling. She was part of a drama group, from speech and language and drama group, from when she was 4 years of age. And she was on stage, she sings, she taught herself how to play um the ukulele and a guitar. She got a little guitar when she was younger, and then when she had her confirmation, she decided she would buy a ukulele with that money, and she taught herself how to play on YouTube, by YouTube.
mm,
And she sings, she dances, she's brilliant at makeup and hair and nails, all of that. She's very, very arty, very creative,
mm,
and she's mad into criminology. She can't get enough of it. She watches loads of crime documentaries, and she actually even watches the ones where the lady who's presenting does her makeup while she's delivering the documentary.
Oh my
So yeah,
God.
it's a
That's a
combination of
multitasking. God, that's a
yeah,
that's
yeah,
unbelievable. But it's
yeah,
lovely to hear, like that seems to be, and that you say even her coming out of school, like they're really finding, I don't think there's anything that beats finding that. As a woman said to me in a recent interview, following your inner beat, everybody needs to find, and it's so different for everyone. We have such a unique note. No two notes are the same, and we need to find it because that is the most important thing in how we contribute to the world. So it's up to each of us. You know, there is no, I think that's where school falls short. So there isn't one note. Be a very boring orchestra or piece of music if we were all just playing the same note or looking at each other. That's what we were talking about. So I just think, wow, to hear that they're doing it. And just to finish up, because yeah, we're just sort of coming up towards the end, but and what's then your, just even talking about, because we've talked a lot about your children, because it's just been such, I think it's just been a very important topic as well, and will support a lot of people who maybe have very special children, and just to understand, for all of us to understand, these are the beautiful children that are coming into the world and have been. It's not to say anyone else is less special. Every child is special, but just saying there is a, it just feels like in the last maybe 10, 20 years, I don't know, I'm just seeing just these, and maybe the world is supporting it more. The earth is sort of supporting, whereas others who have gone before maybe had very, very difficult times, I know, through education and other things. And if we can learn from that and say, well, look, at then it really, and I think that what the lovely thing to hear is these children are quite strong in themselves. I know someone like that, and they will not be told by any parent or anyone, you ain't telling me what to do. And it was so gorgeous to see because they're very sensitive at the same time. So it's
yeah,
not one or the other. There's this fire in them that knows, and yet there's a deep sensitivity. So it's that sort of, and it
yeah,
sounds like you've given that such a space and such nurturing that they couldn't be like this type of family and mother and parents who are doing this is just, I think, phenomenal. It's like changing the world. It really is, because they cannot do it without a home like you provide. It just isn't possible. So just say thank you. I know they're your children, but I just think thank you for all the children, and for, because we're all in this together. You know, it's we really are, and we all benefit from everybody. So just to finish on your passion, because I know this intuitive abilities and a light worker. I love that you described that. How did that, you know, when you described yourself as that, so how do you encapsulate what your passions are now, and you know, your gifts and what you want to do?
I think just about the special children, I think with my children, they're very spirited and they go to the beat of their own drum, you
Mm.
know, so that's very significant. And I would have lent
Well,
into
you've
that.
encouraged it. Sorry, exactly.
Oh
You've
yeah,
lent
I
into
would have
that and
given a
supported
very
it. Yeah,
bohemian kind of
yeah.
lifestyle. Yeah, absolutely. And they've learnt more in the years that we're at home here than they ever did in school, to be
Mhm.
honest, in some ways. But in other ways, they had some beautiful teachers along the way as well that got
Mm.
them and understood them and
Mm.
lent into that as well. But my own passions, I suppose, I'm coming to the stage now where I feel I need to lean into my own passions again and revisit, you know, all the education that I went back to. And even after Rushing came home from hospital, the December he came home in the February, and in the December I was beginning to get itchy feet, even though I was heavily caring. So I reached out to Care Alliance, and they're a fabulous entity, a fabulous support to family carers. They're all family carers themselves, or they shadow care, and they run courses. So I did a re-emerge course, I did a kaleidoscope course, and I did a return ready course. And that's all promoting you to kind of get back into the zone of getting your head in the game for launching yourself again. And we did life coaching, we did interview skills, we did CV prep, we did yoga, we did exercise. There was so much incorporated, and this was all carer led. They did a pilot scheme,
Mm.
and I was part of that pilot scheme, and they took the feedback from us and built the courses around us, really. So from having done them, I'm coming to the stage now where I want to get back into using my therapies and, you know, feel that passion again and just enjoy it. And like I use doTERRA oils here at home,
Mm.
for that. I've used them since my children were quite young, actually, but I've gotten back into them a lot again lately. And it's just to reach into that and to connect with these beautiful communities. And yeah, because like you know yourself, when you're passionate about something, that's when you really feel alive. And like I am so passionate about all the holistic modalities that I've trained in. And just there recently, actually, there at the weekend, I trained in Rahani, and it's another beautiful modality. It's a heart based healing, and it's just I've added to my profile now, so I feel that now is the time for me to step up and step out, and just to lean into it and enjoy it. You know, I've come to that stage in my life where I just want to be earthy again, and you know, just go out and walk on the grass and call in my angels and just be the light worker that I was put on the earth for, you know.
Well, thank you. And you definitely are already. And it's just been such a joy to talk to you. I just want to leave it on that note because it's just so beautiful. I don't think you've strayed far from that at all, from what you described at the very beginning of the interview and how you were brought up. That is how I'm getting the chills and the shivers when I say that. You've been doing that through everything you've described, and it's just another phase of that now. I think it's a meh-hal magic is alive and well and coming back.
That. I love that. Meh-hal
It
magic.
is.
Wow.
It is meh-hal magic.
Do
It
a
is.
workshop on that. That sounds
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I really think so. I can feel the chills now. Because the minute you said that word, it just was like, whoa, it's in my DNA. I feel that. And it is time for that. And so yeah, here's to the meh-hal magic and your magic. And thank you for sharing it, Anne. It's just been such a joy. I just learned so much. And yeah, to everyone listening and who maybe, I'm sure, what Anne has shared has you know, really supported so much. If people do want to reach out, or are you giving contact details at the moment, or what's the best way?
Yeah, I just freshly started a page there on Instagram. So it's Reflex of the Souls.
I'll put them all in the description when I'm putting up the interview. And whatever you can give me afterwards, any contact details, and I'll add them there. Time for her meh-hal magic to be relaunched in the world. I look forward to it. Thank you, Anne.
So
Appreciate your time. Thank you.